Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the sound that you just heard was in fact the biggest first domino to fall for the Minnesota Vikings this offseason. They actually did it. They actually cut Riley Reef. And I know what you're thinking, like, how can you be surprised about this? We've been talking about this for weeks. Even when you did your trade cut keep video, you were the one that cut Riley Reef yourself. So you kind of almost predicted this. But at the same time, I didn't think they were really going to do it. I thought maybe that $1 million that they gave him as an act of good faith at the end of the season, because it was an incentive that he just missed by one game, would be enough to sort of open up the conversation to the point where they would negotiate in good faith and he would restructure and he would stay here because he had a good season. But it turns out that's not the case. That's not how it worked out. Riley Reef is a free agent as of today, folks. And this is incredible. This is amazing. This is the first domino to fall, and this is the one that will open the floodgates. And we are finally going to see what the Vikings plan is for 2021. And I gotta say, as much as I said that this was probably going to happen, as much as we all believed that this was probably going to happen, the reality is setting in right now that the Vikings have to rebuild an offensive line that was really terrible last year, and they're going to be doing it without the guy that was arguably their best offensive lineman more often than not. I don't really think that that's really up for debate. Riley Reef was the anchor. We now need to find a new starting left tackle, and if we move Ezra Cleveland over to tackle, which a lot of people seem to think is the highest possibility or highest probability of happening, now we need to find two starting guards. So we either need to find a new left tackle and a new left guard, or we need to find two new guards. It's one or the other. And then there's also the speculation that Brian O'Neill could move from right to left tackle. Everybody seems to think it's his time to shine. So now you need a left guard and a right tackle. Either way, we're getting two new starters at minimum for the offensive line for the Minnesota Vikings for 2021. And it's funny, the irony is not lost on me, because the same way I talked about with the special teams and the Dan Bailey got released video, it's the same thing here. It's the Vikings are once again just not able to find continuity, or just keeping the same things intact as they want to on one of the most critical position groups of the entire team. And God bless Kirk Cousins, probably going to be running for his life this year unless we make some moves in free agency. But this, before I get to the second point, this does free up cap space, right? And that's one of the big things that makes this possible, is that it frees up $11 million in cap space. After the roster gets adjusted, we are now under the cap by $8.5 million. So they now have room to work with. But what does that mean for the offensive line going forward? Well, as we've already said, they're going to have to rebuild what was a pretty shit offensive line last year without its best player. And here's the thing, and I want to open this up to everybody. Do we trust them to do this? Do we trust the Vikings coaching staff, front office, to put together an offensive line to run it back in 2021? Because it seems like that they're still convinced that if they get all these defensive pieces back, Anthony Barr, who we don't even know if is going to come back at this point on that cap number, Danielle Hunter, Michael Pierce, Eric Kendricks, people that were injured or were lost for the season, they seem to think that if we get all these players back, we're going to be competitive. We can go 10-6 again, get into the playoffs, and do who knows what. I don't know if I would trust this group of coaches and executives to put together an offensive line, because the evidence is just piling up that they can't do that. The evidence is piling up that they can't develop offensive linemen. Even in free agency, they would go out and get somebody like a Josh Klein who looked like he would be a serviceable lineman, and then they cut him after 1 year. It makes no sense. I don't know what they're doing with the offensive line. And it looks like on the interior, if the Ezra Cleveland move to left tackle is actually a thing and does happen, probably still one of the worst interior offensive lines that you could possibly imagine, considering you're going to have to find two new guards, and Garrett Bradbury is just days away, or a season away from being labeled a complete bust, as far as, especially in pass protection. So I don't know if I trust them to fix this. I don't know how this gets better. I'm very concerned now. Even though the writing was sort of on the wall for Riley Reef not being on this team this year. Um, how do you rebuild an offensive line that was terrible without the best player that was on it? It just I don't know how they do this. So um, there is a lot of talent in free agency, especially at the guard position. Kevin Zeitler got released by the Giants today. I expect Minnesota to go after him. Obviously Joe Thuney is going to get paid somewhere. We're probably unlikely to get him. And the guard depth in free agency this year in terms of experience and quality is pretty good. And then, of course, you've got the number 14 overall pick in the draft. A lot of people seem to think that spot is a candidate for an edge rusher. You see a lot of Kwity Paye, Jalen Phillips getting drafted there. Maybe now that changes. We'll have to look at the mock drafts coming up here in the next few weeks, but maybe that changes to Rashawn Slater, or maybe that changes to trade downs to include Sam Cosmi or Liam Eichenberg or players like that, Alex Leatherwood. Maybe they take Christian Darrisaw at 14 overall. I think this opens up the possibility that you're going to see the Vikings big board for the first round, unless they make a move in free agency, where Elijah Vera-Tucker and Rashawn Slater are going to be 1 and 2, because those are the two guys that can swing both in and outside on the offensive line. We've already talked about Rashawn Slater at length. And then Elijah Vera-Tucker suddenly becomes more valuable to this team. Somebody who I have felt would be a reach at 14 overall might not be so much anymore because of his versatility and the number of holes that we have on the offensive line. The entire left side is now void because we're not bringing back Dakota Dozier. Let's not kid ourselves. So that is the news of the day. That is the conversation that we're going to be having. I don't, I know that the Vikings are not done yet. This is just the beginning. We're now getting under the cap. We now have room to make moves. But man, how do you rebuild a terrible offensive line without the best player on it anymore? That is the question of the day. So let me know what you think the answer to that is. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.